All right, everybody, welcome to this week's Corn Belt Umpires Association Zoom Lunch Clinic. My name is Jake Samp. I'm here with Dan Adkins and Jason Baith. Connor will be joining us here in a little while. So apologize for last week not being able to have the clinic. The weather just kind of jumbled up a lot of schedules and whatnot. So 2 weeks ago, we discussed partially what makes a good ejection report. And this week, we're going to talk about handling situations with players. We're not going to discuss coaches this week because the way that you handle a situation with a coach is going to be different than handling a situation with a player to some extent. There will be some videos that we will show that are not being critical of any umpire, players, teams, leagues, anything like that. And as always, feel free to drop a question in the chat or just use the hand raise feature, or just if you catch a break where I'm trying to get my head together, just feel free to just unmute and ask your question. So we're just going to talk about why players and umpires need to work together, what we can do pregame to build rapport with coach or with players, specifically the catchers, how a base umpire can build some rapport with infielders, and just general tips for dealing with players when hot spots arise. So let's talk pregame. The beauty of pregame is we get lineup cards. If I'm working on the bases, I usually have a piece of paper in my pocket, and I'm going to ask the plate umpire, hey, Jason, what's my first baseman's name for insert team? What's my first baseman's name for insert and the other team? And then I'll write that down because that's who I'm gonna be around a lot, being in the A position. If it's a team that we've done a lot, you're gonna start to get to know players, but you're also gonna know who the real captains are. There's the official captains, but then there's the quote unquote unofficial captains, where if you need something handled, they're the ones that have the leadership, just don't have the title. One other thing that I would consider pregame is, how do you want to be addressed? Blue, ump, first name, nickname. I hate being called blue. It's an absolute pet peeve of mine, especially because I usually don't wear powder blue. So I always introduce myself as Jake, and I always tell players, hey, you can call me Jake. Just don't yell at me across the diamond, use my first name, because then we might have some problems. But if it's, hey, Jake, where's that pitch at? That's totally cool. Or, hey, Jake, how's it going? I'm a human. I'm not a robot. And then if there's a nickname or something like that you'd rather be called, just communicate that to them. And do give players grace, where they say, hey, Blue, where's that at? I mean, I'm not going to jump down a kid's throat. If he does it a couple times and say, hey, just a reminder, you can call me Jake. Makes life a little bit easier. But I don't get too picky about how I'm addressed on the field by players. Ump, blue, there's a respectful connotation to that. I just prefer the first name. It's more professional, I guess, in my opinion. Dan, Jason, any thoughts on that?
I'm with you.
Cool. So let's talk, lineup card, all the pregame stuff's done. Umpires, make sure you introduce yourself. Talk to, if you're the plate umpire, talk to your catcher. If I'm working a game and the catcher comes up while I'm still at the dirt circle and I'm working the bases, I will definitely, tell the catcher, hey, have fun. Appreciate you adhering to the job description. and joke around with them a little bit. It builds rapport. It's super important on the plate because a good catcher can go to bat for an umpire. And if you got a coach that's jumping, hey, where's that missing that? Where's that missing that? Or that that's not a strike. Or that's not a ball, and the catcher goes, yeah, it was. A catcher can definitely be an advocate for an umpiring crew. I personally think building rapport with your infielders is critical as well, and that's often overlooked. And it's important because if the second baseman wants me to take a step to my left, yeah, that's fine. And I want him to know that, hey, I might not hear you the first time. Just, say my first name, and let's just, I'll move if it's a reasonable request. And on a side note, don't move in. Always go to your left. If you're on the B side, if you're on the C side of the field, go to the right. We never want to go in to the mound. We always want to go towards the foul lines if we're moving somewhere. When I'm working the plate, as long as there's no offensive players around or coaches, I'm going to ask the catcher, what am I going to see today? The last thing that I want to have happen to me, and I've had this happen before, is you get to the fourth inning and all of a sudden you see a knuckleball. So figure out what these players or what these pitchers have as far as pitches in their toolbox. If the slider runs, I want to see it, because catchers want to get strikes for their pitcher. We want to call strikes. I would much rather strike a ball than ball a strike. Dan, you got anything else specifically on this?
Be a strike umpire. I agree with him completely. The sin is missing strikes, particularly at the level that you may be at or in a game that requires that we have to open the zone up a little bit. Everything's a strike until it's not. I was really proud today that very high stress situation, scoreless game, 6th inning, catcher absolutely punishes this pitch because he thinks it's going to be high, jumps up and then does this and catches it right at the top of the zone. And I came up and said, yeah, if it's a gopher game, if it's Augustana, I'm probably not able to grab that because of the catcher's conduct. But at the level I was working today, I'm not leaving strikes out there. So yeah. And that's the kind of thing you want to do. The pregame should be thinking about, what am I doing today? Am I going to be demanding, or am I going to be open? I had that conversation with myself. And again, it's me, it's not my partner, but I do that prep. And then if my partner's got questions about specific, unique things that he likes to do in terms of covering plays, we get that done. Carter and I had a 40-minute pregame today to talk about balls off the fence, to talk about what we do in a 2-man, because we've been working mostly 3 and 4. And it came into play immediately, repeatedly. And then on the crucial play of the day, where I think he owes me a beer, he made a decision that I really like. He just didn't announce it. Not to steal the show, but US Bank has a nightmare scenario because there's padding on the left field wall and it's covered by gray fences and it's metal. And you might hear the ball off it, but that's 350 feet away from the plate guy, more than that even. So it's a bit of a challenge. This ball's hit the left center, and it should be either fairly obviously caught, or it's going to be a question about whether it gets out or not. It's 2-man. I'm inside, and we had a single runner at first. So it's not my ball, but I can take it if my plate guy wants to work on third base. What he did was he stayed home and kept the baseball and didn't tell me. Now I've only been working with Matt Carter since he started, because I trained that little bastard. Anyway, he's my little brother. So what I do, if you're a base guy, and I know Jake does this because I've seen him do it. I'm betting Connor does it. If you're a base guy and you're working with someone that maybe you haven't worked with a lot, or you haven't heard anything from him, and he's supposed to cover third, well, you can get to that point. But the first thing I want you to do is use your peripheral vision. So I've got about 175 degrees that I can grab while I'm still watching runners making advance. And I've got secondary eyes out where the ball's going to be. I don't see my brother. I don't hear him and I don't see him. So I start moving instead of up to second base to lock in because I don't have third. I now start working to high C. So I got both bases. And so when I'm doing that, I'm still waiting to hear maybe he's coming late, or maybe he's trying to get a read and then but he wants to be set and stable. All I needed from him was, Danny, I'm staying home. True double read, challenging catch, no catch, and he wants to stay still. That's fine, but I want you to announce it. So that's why he's buying me a sour beer. I like tall, sour. Anyway, but we had pre-gamed. There'll be adjustments because, number one, these are two guys that don't work a lot of two-man. We're coming back to it. And you know what really becomes a challenge is the backside of that double play. When you're used to being U2 or U3, it blows up on your ass. And the very first one we had of the day was extremely close. I did see video of it because Kyle Hartwig is a fucking super, excuse my French. He's a coach over at first base. And I asked him, I said, I want to see that again. So he brought me his phone quietly between innings. And I did get it right. But because it's the first time I'd seen it and it showed up kind of quick. Pre-game on unusual things or things you prefer to do means the world. It gets you connected. It gets you thinking. It wakes your brain up. But it also has you sort of set and ready for unusual plays. Now, I've worked a fair amount with Jake. I've worked once, I think, with Connor. And the fact that we're this friendly. So the pregame is how you try to get that set up and make it meaningful.
Pre-games are especially important for 5:30 a.m. first pitches. Just saying.
I will peek every time at my plate umpire if I'm in the field and they should be going to third, because at the same time, yes, I have baseball. Yes, I have help with baseball and touches, but there's a lot of dead time where I don't need to be staring at runners when they're nowhere near anybody or a base. So I usually peek and look and make sure my partner's going where they're supposed to be. So I know if I don't hear them.
So, Mike, let's table that for later here. The thing that I would say is just a pitch is always a strike until it proves otherwise. That's how I was taught. So we're gonna go back here. So this video has made its rounds through. I wish I had control over the video. This video has made its rounds basically at the pitch, and the catcher just sticks it and holds it and holds it and keeps holding it. This plate umpire is actually a friend of mine, and I told him I was going to use it. He just said be nice to him, which I thought he did everything right here. This is excessive, and we'll talk about what he does here in a second. But we have a couple others where they're just kind of sticking it. I mean, it's not a huge issue. Catcher turns around, which at the levels we're at, whatever, at the pro level, it's completely different. But what I will say is this is where your potential negative interactions with the catcher will most likely present itself. They turn around, who cares? But keep professional. Up, down, in, out are very good ways to describe where a pitch is at. If it missed up, if it missed down, it was inside, outside. And if the catcher's got a question on a pitch, as long as it's reasonable, answer the question. We're not going to win any favors by just saying no. And if it's a batter that asks, if it's like, most of the time a batter will ask, hey, was that close? That was a good pitch. Is a very good answer to the question, is that as far out as we're going today? That's a good pitch. How do you answer a question without answering the question? that's a good technique to use in a situation like that. Dan, Connor, any thoughts? Jason?
Same page.
I started using something last year that Dan actually mentioned on a call when they asked, "Is that as far out as we're going today?" I don't know, haven't decided yet.
I love that one.
Like a chuckle or like a huh, and then they stop asking. But it works and it's a response. So
The only thing I'd say is if you decide after confronting this catcher, you get your face down in his and you're going to eject him, you got to at least crow hop it once. You got to sell it. You got to make that hurt.
So let's talk about how do you deal with the catcher that is just doesn't get it. Okay. Everybody on this call, think to yourself, do you carry a brush on turf? Because I do. And I know a lot of people here do carry brushes on turf because it's a great way to, call time, brush the plate off. Yes, it looks really dumb to brush a turf field plate off, but it's less about the brushing and more about what we're communicating. Because when you go and brush the plate off, you can sit as Brian's doing here. I guarantee you, Brian's just having a conversation like, don't do that again. So but the conversation, I guess, generally just goes, hey, if you have a question, just ask, but catch the ball, throw it back. Connor, anything else on that?
Nope. I mean, I use that tactic pretty often. I always carry a plate brush, no matter what, for multiple reasons, that being one of them. But yeah, I just have a conversation. Hey, we can talk. We can have conversations about pitches as long as we're both professional. But that crossed the line. And usually I'll tell them, okay, we're done talking at some point. If they're asking every pitch. But my biggest thing is I communicate not directly with them, if that makes sense. So I'm never really going to be face to face or looking at them unless they really poke the bear. And it's one of those things where you just got to find what works for you and stick with it.
Absolutely.
Try different things until you find something that works.
If it's a coach asking, and we'll kind of go more in depth on this in future calls. But the in, out, up, down, don't ever. It's always in or out because they can see up and down really, really well.
Make the catcher tell them.
That too.
I'm a big proponent of, and that's when I'm taking pitches before the game, like as they're warming up, I'll tell them, hey, if your coach has a question on where a pitch is at, I want you to tell them for me, because you know as well as I do where that pitch was. And most of the time they're pretty honest, and they'll tell the coach, hey, that's out, that's up, that's whatever. Or he hasn't been there all day. I've gotten that a few times. Whether they agree with the pitch or not, or whether they think it should be a strike or not, they're telling them, hey, he's not calling that. And that usually eliminates a lot of the issue with getting into ball strike warnings if you don't respond and you let the catcher do it for you.
Hey guys, thoughts on ball that's down, ball that's up, or do you just ball and strike?
Thanks for the question, Jesse. And I just sent you a text message a couple minutes ago. I guess my 2 cents on it is ball that's down, that's a bad habit. If they got a question in my mind, have them ask, because the situation that I want to avoid is 2 innings later where they see a pitch that's at the same, we'll just say it's at the hollow of the kneecap. And the catcher, both times the catcher doesn't move the glove, but the catcher set up a little bit differently on each pitch. Well, if I said, ball that's out one time and then the same view from the dugout occurs, you could catch some flack because, well, 2 innings ago that was outside and now you're calling that a strike. And so I personally would avoid it, and I would recommend avoiding it. I don't know if Dan or Connor or Jason have a different perspective on that.
I call every pitch. I tell them every pitch that misses where it misses. I do it so the batter and the catcher can hear. I don't communicate to the dugouts. I'm creating a rapport. And if you've got the stones where you can handle that conversation, hey, that looks like that other one. They don't tell me that. They don't, you work through. And I've had guys say, just tell them in and out because they can see top and bottom. I don't care what they can see. And I don't trust what they can see. So I'm communicating to my guys. And what happens is, like Connor talked about, if I'm having a fluid conversation and I'm honest and I'm working hard, my catcher's going to immediately jump in and say, that one's down, Tom. Or, that's off. That's 2 balls off. And I don't even have to address it. And that gets me away from it. But you've got to have, like I said, you got to be real confident. You got to be real secure in your what you're doing that day. And you got to be real dialed in. You can't miss stuff. Because if you're missing saying, I should have struck that, throw it back there, your credibility is in question. You just want to avoid that. That's ungluing. You want to stay away from that. But for me, it keeps me sharper. And I've gotten to a point, and I've been at clinics. I've had guys like Jimmy Craig. I've had Toronto. I've had other guys say, if you're doing it every time and you're consistent, it works well. But I'll back Jake up on this. Do what's good for you. If you don't want to have that conversation, if you don't want to be yelling, I know there's some guys that'll get loud and say ball out for really like a 2-2 pitch that's close. Well, if you're not doing it on all of them, it looks like you're trying to create some salesmanship. And I don't know how that resonates. I think I do it each time. You can get louder if it's a high quality pitch or a high stress pitch. I tend not to. I call them the same. Tim Cheedy used to say, call every pitch. Say something on every pitch. Say a little bit about why, because you're building your relationship, frankly, with the pitcher. I had a kid today threw a really quality pitch, and it just sort of fluttered, took off at the end, and didn't hold the corner. And I balled. I said, ball, that's out. He didn't hear what I said. So he looks at me and just real quietly does this. And I go, yep. And he felt great. He didn't hi-hat me. We just kept moving. He was damn afraid of the clock. So one of the things the clock did for us, it just got everybody, they kept moving. We didn't have a single issue with it other than my partner grabbed a reset when we had nobody on. And I had to talk to him afterward. I was like, I understand what you're doing because you saw him do it and you jumped on it, but we were still on the clock and he would have hit 20. And so that's not for this conversation, but I'm better than Matt Carter. Shut up, Carter. Why are you laughing?
I don't know who he is, but I doubt it. So on the whole, like telling location, I probably do for the first 3 innings, maybe 4. And then I kind of tail it off. But from my perspective, I'm telling the catcher where my zone's at today. And then he learns that, okay, that's out. So when he throws it there again and I ball it, he knows it's out. And he can communicate to the pitcher. He can communicate to whoever else that, hey, that pitch is off the plate, or that pitch might be right there. It might be a really good pitch, but he's not calling today. He's not giving us the entire river. He's only giving us the inner half. But by the 3rd or 4th inning, I've assumed that the catcher knows what I'm calling and doesn't need my help anymore. But if he asks, I'm still going to tell him. But I kind of tail off after the first probably 3 innings.
That's a really good point. And what he'll do is he'll tell the pitcher by quickly flipping and throwing it back. He won't even hold it. He won't even be interested in it because Connor's already convinced him that's not going to work. And frankly, that's when the game really gets fun. It kind of umpires itself at that point. You can't completely trust it, but
good catch.
That's what that communication's about. You get there.
Mm-hmm. So let's just kind of expand this back out a little bit more with just players as a whole. Players look to us as a resource, but we need to keep in mind that players are competitive. Okay, and sometimes that competitiveness will come out in a way that we may not want it to, or where leagues may not want it to. And we need to know how to address those situations. If it's a heated situation, try to separate players as a crew. And I guess the best way that I can describe this is, if your partner is explaining something to a fielder, okay? And all of a sudden, the pitcher, the catcher, everybody else wants to come in and put their 2 cents in. Whoever the other umpire is needs to come in and grab the other players and get them out of there. I don't ever want to have a situation where my partner's got, you know, where it's a 2-on-1 type situation where you got 2 players that are just going after my partner. I had one in the state tournament a couple years ago where I had the catcher and a coach on my plate umpire, and as U1, I just came down and I grabbed the catcher. I left the coach with my partner, and I talked to the catcher. If we do have warnings that we need to issue, whether it be for language, unsportsmanlike conduct, make it big and make it obvious. I would say, like, make it known that there's a warning that's being issued. We don't need to have these quiet warnings. You know, a couple weeks ago, we talked about how pretty much every game is being recorded now. And, you know, you eventually eject and you say there's a warning, and they go and get the video and it doesn't show that there was a warning. Well, now all of a sudden, you know, Jesse, you're probably getting the video, and now we got other issues. And so if we can make it known that there's a warning that's been issued, regardless of whether we pull the coach out of the dugout or from their position, it can help alleviate issues later on down the road. Daniel?
I'm with you.
Connor, anything else?
I had a situation last year in a game where a kid hits a double, and it's not really a competitive game. One team is getting throttled, and the team's down. Kid hits a double, gets a second, and kind of celebrates, right? The shortstop, the middle infielder start talking to him, and they start talking trash. And they're kind of jawing back and forth, and I let it go for a little bit. And I turn around, I said, next pitch, I turn around and go, hey, guys, are we all having fun out here? Yep, yes, sir, we're good. Okay. So I just kind of leave it at that. Basically say, hey, I'm acknowledging the fact that you guys are talking to each other and want to make sure that you guys understand that I hear it. And kind of maybe put a bug in their ear of, hey, he recognizes that he knows something's going on, and maybe they stop. They didn't, and it escalated to kind of a STFU kind of thing. And I turn around and warn them. And they're like, well, I go, guys, I tried. I tried to get the point across without warning and without telling you just to knock it off, and you didn't listen. They're like, yep, got it. And the coach goes, Connor, what happened? He goes, were they talking shit? Go, yep. He goes, nope, got it. Makes sense. Because he knew their players. But it's one of those where he goes, he saw me turn. He goes, I saw you turn around, so I figured you must have been talking about something before you warned him. And I was like, okay, we're good. But I made it obvious that I was addressing those 3 guys, and the coach knew it and saw it. And he kind of knows his players. But that way, when I came with the warning, he wasn't surprised.
I hate this story, but I will tell it. There's a certain team up here, St. John's, shall remain nameless. They were famous for props, and they have been told, and it won't matter. Some of the stuff is so damn funny that I almost want to let it go, but they're really clever. They play golf between halves, the hacky sack with no hacky. They're bizarre, and there's too many of them, and they're smart, and they're climbing all over the ropes. This situation happened with a partner that I will not name, who just lost the plate. They won the first game at Bethel. It's drum tight. One of these 2 teams is going to win the conferences 2 years ago, and my partner just flat lost it in the 7th inning of a 9-inning game. And St. John should have won by 3 or 4 runs, ended up winning by 1 run. And he's just balling everything that's over the plate. It's just, and the catcher just keeps looking at him, and he knows something's wrong, so he's not really engaging. But the dugout lost their minds, and they're screaming at my partner, and it's starting to get. They've got his name, so they're including that. So I walked over and I went, "Time, all of you! You are all warned. You got to stop." And I even said out loud, "I get it, but you got to shut it down. If I hear any more, I'm tossing. You got to stop. Jerry Haugen, the head coach, is over third base, so he doesn't know which one of them is doing it. And inning ends, they're fine. We start moving on. My partner wants me to come talk to him. He's like, I'm not coming in there. I'm gonna let you work. Jerry comes over to me and he goes, and Jerry knows my family. He was recruited at St. John's by my uncle. He gets right, and he's that tall, and he gets right up underneath and he goes, Danny, which one was it? I'm gonna go over there and chew his ass. And I go, start at that pole and end at that one. Every single swing, and you know what? And all of them. And he goes, really? And I'm like, and I know why. And so you gotta. Sometimes carrying your partner means not engaging with him. It means not running down and being seen to be talking to him and trying. Because what I told him was, call it all. I don't care where it is. You just got to get some strikes. Something's got to happen. After the game, he actually turned to me and said, "How did that go?" And I'm like, "Really?" He took the rest of the season off. So there was something wrong. Anyway, Connor's dead right. If you need to grab multiples, be loud, be obvious, be demonstrative, and then finish, and then get the hell out of it. And then really do get out of the way, get cleared out. And that can communicate to other people. And you are shown to be doing your business, but you don't want to stick around. You don't want to engage, because the conversation can get a little hairy after that. And the fact that the coach came over and was smart enough to own it, it's great. And if you do it right, if you do it early, you don't have to eject, and you survive it. And hopefully players learn, but they're players.
So the last bullet on this slide is just how do we address coaches when we have player issues or concerns? Sometimes it's not practical to pull a coach out of the dugout or from their position. So we have to be big, loud, demonstrative. If I'm able to, and I'm not going to slow the game down, I do want to try to get the coach out. I had one a couple years ago, and this was right when the NCAA really started cracking down on bench jockeying. And I'm standing on the line, and I heard, a couple things. I kind of looked in the dugout. I said, hey, we're not doing that today. And they kept going. Well, by the time, they continued to keep going, the inning was over. And so I had a team coming off the field, and this specific school, the head coach does not go out on the base paths. And so I pulled my lineup card out, and I said, hey, insert name. I got a question for you, quick. He's like, hey, what's up? I said, hey. And the whole time I'm doing this, like I look like, if you look on the camera, I'm drawing pictures on my lineup card. And I just said, hey, I appreciate you guys' passion, but make sure to talk to their own teammates. We can't have them doing this. And I don't remember if I actually gave them the warning or not. It was kind of a borderline type deal. It's more or less preventative umpiring. So I don't think I warned in that situation, but it was just, hey, this is what's going on. And, just nip in the bud for me, please. And the beauty of it was, is as that coach was walking back to the dugout, the opposing coach comes out of the dugout to go to third base and swings right by me. He's like, hey, are you aware of the bench jockeying that's going on? I said, yep, already taken care of. And so using your lineup card, that's a great, I don't want to say prop, but it's like using your brush when you need to talk to a catcher, where you're able to have that conversation, but not draw attention to it.
Yeah, definitely. If I got bench jockeying or any time I have a player issue, I'll pull up my lineup card and get the coach out and just say, hey, how important is this person to your game? And if it's bench jockeying, I might ask the catcher, hey, who's starting the next one? Or what number is your closer? And I'll pull them out, especially because usually they're in the dugout, right? I'm like, hey, coach, is 45 important to you? Yeah. Well, him or somebody around him is running their mouth and it's bench jockeying. And if I have to get somebody, he's the one that's talking. When I look over there, he's going to be the one. Well, he'd never say anything like that. Okay, well, then you might want to figure out who it is and shut it down. And usually that they may know I know who's starting the next game, but it doesn't register at the time because they know that kid's really important to us winning this game. and they want to keep them there, and they'll do whatever it takes to make that happen.
Okay, I need to correct that. Not the next game starter, the last game starter, because that fool's going to sit for 3 or 4 days. The next game starter needs to survive. What's wrong with you? God damn, Connor.
Not my plate. Not my plate, Dan. It's all you.
I learned the yesterday starter trick, and thankfully I haven't had to use it yet. But it's a good little tool to have in your back pocket, especially both of them are in these situations. So I'm going to just make sure nobody has any additional questions relating to this before I stop the Zoom, because we have at least one other thing to talk about post meeting. So any questions on what we've talked about today?
Jake, is there a signal for warning someone?
Stop sign.
Depends. It's a great question. No, there's not like you don't necessarily finish with a punt. It's verbal. You want to make sure you're nice and loud and say, that's your official warning if it's something you want other people to hear. But what's really the signal is when you write it in your book. You write his name down, you write the circumstance down, what you're not going to tolerate again. It should, the stop sign is a stop sign is part of the process to get to the warning. So I wouldn't say that that's the signal, but you might be doing that. This is your official warning as well. But there's really not an approved mechanic from CCA about when we've warned. You just want to be real loud about it. And you do want to make sure that the person that you have warned is aware of it. When I got Bishop at South Dakota State and I said, hey, I got an extra warning for you. And he said, F that, you got to F and get rid of me. I was like, that makes this real simple. and we go. But because I've been doing this to try to keep him in the dugout. That doesn't matter. He didn't care about that.
Usually
Okay.
for me, player, I will get the coach's attention and point and say, that's 45, and point to 45. That's his warning. That's his warning. And not necessarily yell it, but say it loud enough that the coach hears me and that the player understands that it's him. If you point at him, it shows up on film. And then you can be like, this is where I warned him right here. Why would I point at him but yell at the dugout? Right? So that's kind of my mechanism for warning players. I'll tell the coach loudly enough. I don't pull him out of the dugout. I just, hey, Jim, 45's been warned. And you let him know. That way everybody hears it. And there's no doubt who it's on.
Thank you.
Any other questions relating to what we've talked about today? Hearing none, I will stop the recording now.